On November 2nd, this Tuesday, the Commonwealth of Virginia will elect its newest governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, and all 100 delegates of the House of Delegates. It's been a close race. Many campaign messages have been sent out. There have been millions of early voting. But who will be our next governor? It's Stay the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville, and we'll be back in just a moment to discuss the upcoming election. Welcome back. It's Stay the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville. We want to thank you again for joining us on this absolutely beautiful Sunday here in Hampton Roads. The last day of October. We have had a phenomenal time here on the campus of Norfolk State University, and you're listening to WNSB FM, the new sound of Hot 91, the soul of VA. Look, since the last couple of weeks have been so impactful for us here in the Commonwealth, and more specifically here with the Spartan Nation. Homecoming was absolutely phenomenal, tremendous. We had so many of our alumni, so many of our stakeholders, students, administration, faculty, and those that love the university came home to see all their friends. We had a phenomenal game. We're on a 6-game winning streak here. The MEAC men's and women's track team here in Norfolk State swept the MEAC championships, and with our basketball team coming off of the MEAC championship and the only Virginia school to win an NCAA game in March Madness this past year, kicked off its season with Spartan Madness on last night, and they're ready to win, both men and women. The men are ready to defend the MEAC championship, and the men and women are really ready to win another one. So much happening, so many great things here at the university. Also, what just happened, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, this week, Thursday, Norfolk State University hosted Pharrell Williams' special event, The Elephant in the Room, where he brought and welcomed stakeholders, business leaders from across the community and the country, and some from outside the country, where he brought stakeholders that manage over $3 trillion in assets here on the campus of the Norfolk State University to talk about economic upward mobility, economic opportunities here in the 757, more specifically here where he called Norfolk State University and HBCU's golden talent. That's what he called us here. But we already know that. We know that Norfolk State is a golden treasure, but we have lots of talent here where, again, it's great to be a Spartan. It's always been great to be a Spartan, but it's surely great to be a Spartan now, especially under the leadership that we have of our president, which we affectionately call Dr. J. Her vision, as she always said, this is our time, our moment, and we're going to move forward. So for those of you that have been joining us here on this month of Stay the Water, we've got our producer here, Marvin Folks, also known as DJ Scandalous, who you could hear on air Monday through Friday from 2 to 6 doing his thing. You've been listening to our election series, Conversation with the Candidates, an election series, where we've broken down all the races. We've talked about these races. We've had candidates on the show. We also hosted, Norfolk State University partnered with Wavy 10 to host the only gubernatorial round table in the entire Commonwealth that was aired across the entire Commonwealth on NBC. Think about that. We were the only one to host a gubernatorial round table. And with that, we had an opportunity for all of our listeners, all of our alumni, students, staff, faculty, and stakeholders to engage and listen to what each candidate, their plan for the Commonwealth. Not only that, but we also hosted our conversation with the candidates for the Democratic slate of nominees for governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general here on air. So we had all of them on air this past June before the June race, where individuals voted for members of their own party to represent their party in the general election. But of course, with the Republican side, we did not host them because they did not have a convention where they actually had candidates run, but they hosted kind of an unorthodox convention where they nominated a candidate. And it was, you almost had to be someone to specialize in physics or calculus to kind of figure it out. But they got their candidate, and it was Glenn Youngkin. They got their lieutenant governor candidate and also their attorney general candidate. And right now, here in the Commonwealth, this race is going to be one of the tightest races that we see for governor. It's going to be one of the tightest ones. And again, we're going to go through and point out why some believe this race is tight. We're going to go through and point out, from various experts outside of the university. We're also going to talk about it. We're going to talk about why this race is close. And not only that, but I want you to give us your thoughts. Go to our social media at WNSBonline.org, at WNSBonline.org. Let us know who you're voting for. You'll see the post on our social media, both Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, where you'll see this Stay the Water advertisement. Right under that advertisement, right under that post, that link, give us your comments. Who are you voting for? Why are you voting, if you want to tell us? And if you're not voting, can we convince you to go out and vote? And we're going to talk about that because this is our Get Out the Vote show. Get out to vote, but get out to vote for the candidate of your choice. Because here on Stay the Water, we don't tell you what to think or how to think, but we give you the information, facts, so that you can make a more well-informed decision. Now, let's kind of get into this right now. In the first half of the show, we're going to break down who's on the ballot again. We're going to break down what their platforms are and things that they've stated. We're also going to break down where you can go vote. And then in the second half of the show, we're going to talk about why this race is so close. We're going to look at some analysis that's out there, and why the candidates are so neck and neck when, of course, before this, that wasn't the case. But now it is. What's changed? Is it going to swing the other way? Why are individuals energized or not energized to vote for certain candidates? These are all things that are extremely important, for every election, but more specifically here for the Commonwealth. Marvin, folks, and I, we have conversations about this before the show all the time. And it's amazing how within 7 days, how things change so drastically. It's amazing within a short period of time how one messaging can change the entire dynamics of the conversation. But that's really what it's all about, right? So that's why we love it so much. That's why we love public policy so much. That's why we love doing what we do. So let's get into it. First of all, I want to talk about where to go vote, okay? So right now, we know that early voting started Friday, September 17th, first day. So we've had 45 days where you can actually go in Monday through Friday to your voter registration office, clerk of court, wherever you go vote within your city. Here, city is down at City Hall in the city of Norfolk, of course. Other cities within the 757, you can go vote similarly in those areas. And the last several weeks, you've been able to vote, of course, on Saturday. And not only that, but we could also vote on Sunday, right? On Sunday. Think about that. So when we talk about, going out, outreach, we're talking about ministry and the like, this is one of the greatest outreach ministries that any organization, religious organization can do, right? But this was made available. No excuse. Early voting, in-person voting, because of the legislature that we had. When the Democrats took over, and again, we're giving you the facts here, but when they took over, removed all of that. And also, Governor Northern, the legislature signed the Voting Rights Act here in the Commonwealth of Virginia on the state level to protect your right to vote, access to voting, access to the voting ballot, as opposed to other states like Florida, Texas, Georgia that are restricting, and North Carolina still challenging access to the voting box. I mean, they're restricting, chipping away. That's why we need a federal designation, a federal law, a federal act, the John Lewis Voting Act, to restore the protections of the original Voting Rights Act of 1965, in which Shelby County versus Holder decimated 2013, right? Taking away the formula for pre-clearance and therefore nullifying the need for pre-clearance. Now, we're not going to get into that because we've talked about that before, but it's good to understand how we got here, where we are, and where we need to be. Where we need to be is all on you. It's all on you to get out, get the vote out, and let us know where you think we should go. Only you can make that decision with your vote. In the words of the late John Lewis, voting is the most powerful nonviolent weapon we have in our democracy. Every voice can be heard if you get out and go vote. You can tell I'm excited about this. I mean, listen, we talk about politics, but it's really the power to change. Take out all the other negativity when you talk about politics and so forth. But I look at voting as the power to change, giving the people the right, the ability to create change. That is absolutely phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. So early voting actually ended. It actually ended last day to vote where you could vote in person at your local voter registration office was yesterday, October 30th. Okay. It ended at 5 o'clock. So for those of you that took advantage of early voting, like myself, my wife, our family, we early voted. It's one of those things you could do after you get everybody off to school. Stop right down at your voter registration office, go right in. Literally took 7 minutes. 7 minutes. That's from the time we parked, walked in, elevator to the place where we go vote, showed our ID, bubbled in our bubbles, put our ballot in the feeder. It was counted, got our sticker, back in the car. And Marvin said his mother and father did the same thing. Again, it was made so easy. And even if you don't want to do it Monday through Friday, you could have done it on Saturday or said, hey, we're going to take the men's group, the women's group, missionary group, the youth group, those who can't vote, the young ministry group. We're going to go down after church and go vote.
I'll be there Tuesday in the trenches.
And Marvin said he's volunteering. He's going to be there on Tuesday. As he said, these are his words, in the trenches. In the trenches. So if you got the time, you can go out and vote and volunteer on November 2nd. This Tuesday, you can go vote. If you didn't early vote, you can go. The polls actually open early and they stay open later. So we know here in Hampton Roads, we're inundated with traffic backups and the like. If you're working 8 to 5, you got to get the kids off to school and things of that nature, or you have to be at a job that does not give voting as a holiday, then we understand. But you can now make plans to go and vote as soon as you get off. Before you go home, go to your local polling place. A lot of places, it's the schools in your community, right? It's some churches in your community, some community centers in your community, library in your community, or you can go down to City Hall. You can go and vote. Just make it an intentional moment for a movement. Make it that. It has to be intentional. Keep in mind, when we talk about voting, we got to talk about how many people bled and died for the right to vote. Attacked by dogs, water hoses, the whole nine, just to fight for us the right to vote. And I always say this, if you take a look at those that fight against you, look at what they fight against you greatest. And that is more likely the most important thing in that area, that community, that country, that state. We were fought against having opportunities to be educated, to vote, to own property, economic upper mobility. education, elections, and economics. Let's just call it E to the third power. Those are the ways that we can really create change. Being educated, having economic upward mobility, and participating in elections to change the policy which therefore creates accountability, not just on a local level, state level, federal level, but also on a corporate level as well. Listen, I'm excited. 757-823-9110. We're live in studio. 757-823-9110. This is our Get Out the Vote show where we're talking about, right now, talking about where you can go vote, the ability that we had to early vote. We're going to now pivot and take a look at the races that are out there, what's on the ballots. And then in the second half hour, we're going to take a look at the polls and see where these races are. And we're going to talk about the reasons why this race is so close and why it can change, why it has changed, what were the messaging, what changed your mind, and where this election more likely will go. 757-823-9110. Again, we're live in studio. Call in, let us know, or you can tell us your thoughts on our social media at WNSBonline.org, at WNSBonline.org. Go to our post of Stay the Water on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and let us know. What are your thoughts? You can even go to LinkedIn. Who are you voting for? What are your thoughts about the election? And if you're not voting, tell us why. And hopefully, at the end of this show, we can convince you to go and exercise your right to vote. Listen, I just got a message from Delegate Cliff Hayes, who we know is an alum of the university and someone who is a phenomenal supporter of our institution, and he's on the show all the time. And you know, one thing I want to say, he says, of course, he says, preach, brother, but he says, whenever there has been progressive policies moving the government towards a more humane focus, there has always been a backlash. So we expect extremists to be violently upset and want to turn the clock back. However, we stand ready to continue to treat people humanely. That means we have more work to do. In other words, we ain't finished yet. That's a message from Delegate Cliff Hayes, NSU alum and House of Delegate Representative, who's also running for re-election. He's been on the show. He's talked about his election, what's going on in his community, and also how we can create change through the ballot. Delegate Cliff Hayes, my brother, thank you so much for your input. Those of you, again, when he talked about, he mentioned when you see progressive policies moving the government forward through a more humane focus, there's always going to be a backlash. And that is significant because it tells us that our vote means something. It means the power to change. And when we create that power to change, of course, powers to be don't like change because things are working for them, right? You know, why, if you're getting all the benefit and you have all of a sudden have to share, you know, and I put that in air quotes here, because you're not really sharing, but there's more opportunity out there. You can't have all. After many, as Marvin said, after many years of having everything, but we're creating new streams of economics. Listen, almost out of thin air, we're having a new economy that's being created here in the Commonwealth, and that's the green economy. Dominion Energy is creating offshore wind energy. That is a new form of economics. That's a new form of energy. That's a new form of jobs. That's a new form of economic upward mobility that's available to all people. And they're in creating policy for accountability to make it so. It's happening. So that's something that's never existed. You know, again, creating a new tunnel here that we have coming through the HRBT. That's new. New opportunity for wealth. New opportunity. All right. So we got a news break here. We're gonna cover this. It talks about the Virginia Governor, Attorney General, and Lieutenant Governor election results. This just came out of Roanoke, but we're going to take a look at this poll that they have here, and we're going to take a look at it in the second half hour. But you know, so again, we're getting news breaks as we're on air. We're getting comments while we're on air, and things are being updated even as we talk. But the power for change, the power for policy. Policy creates accountability, and it creates generational wealth. I was just talking about this coming in, where one of my favorite mayors of all time, Maynard Jackson, one of my heroes of creating policy accountability for economic upper mobility. When the airport in Atlanta was expanding, he made it intentional to the business community at the time that in order for Atlanta to grow to be successful, it has to grow and include African Americans. So intentionally, they brought African Americans were made a part of the expansion of the airport there and other building opportunities to grow Atlanta. And to this day, you have hundreds, if not thousands, of African American families and businesses that are multimillionaires today that benefited from that one intentional economic policy. That one intentional economic policy. That's the power of being intentional. That's the power of creating change, positive change. That's the power of rising up an entire community that were intentionally left out. Again, this is the reason why we do what we do. This is the reason why we're in the community every day. This is the reason why we're on the show. That's the reason why we're out there campaigning. That's the reason why we're out there talking about the power of voting. But there also has to be, on the other side, accountability. So once the vote's there, we need accountability to ensure that the change is going to come. This past legislature, several years of legislation that's come out in this last administration here in the Commonwealth has shown that. We've talked about it here on the show. If there was a matter of fact, Marvin, you may remember this. We actually did a show here where we talked about a tale of two states, two former Confederates, both Virginia and Georgia, and we centered it around access to the ballot box, how we were increasing access to the ballot box and they were restricting access to the ballot box, right? Now, with that being the case, we also start to we're looking at economics and the participation through economics that we can create, right? So we're taking it by steps, but also education. And I'm going to stick with that, E to the third power. We're going to stick with that. Education, economics, and elections, right? So that's our power. That's our power. We can create generational change through E to the third power. So, we got a lot of great ideas brainstorming in here. But that's the power of this show. So let me get back to where you can vote. All right. So again, you can cast your vote. Cast your vote this Tuesday in the general election. Now listen, also for those of you who have what's called a mail-in ballot, you can actually drop your mail-in ballot off at ballot boxes across the area in which you're voting. And of course, if you have a mail-in ballot, the deadline to apply was October 22nd, okay? But you also have to so you can't get one now. But if you have it, you can drop it off. You got to get it in the mail as soon as possible. You can put it in your mailbox, or you can take it in to the place where you cast your ballot, and you can drop it off there, okay? So you can drop it in the mail, or you can drop it off. But you got to get that mail-in ballot sent in. You got to make it happen, okay? But again, for those of you that have not voted, that did not take advantage of early voting, you can vote on Tuesday, the general election day, November 2nd. You can vote. You can vote. Go and vote. Get out and vote. This is your opportunity to make your voice heard. And don't go by yourself, right? Take your friends. Say, hey, are you registered to vote? Let's go. Let's go vote, and let's go get something to eat afterwards, or let's, do whatever afterwards. Let's enjoy, the weather. Now, if you're off that day, consider volunteering, at the polls. Consider calling your friends. Say, hey, have you guys voted today? Let's go vote. If there are senior citizens in your community, senior citizens at your church, as we call we call the mothers and fathers of Zion, pick them up, make it intentional, make it a day. And you guys do something nice afterwards. Let's just not be one-time vote, but let's do something nice. If you are, again, off, if you work for the government, if you work for a company that's giving leeway for you to go vote, right? then you can go do it. Go do it and go together. Volunteer if you can. Help out at the polls if you can. Do whatever you can. And not only that, but if there is a candidate or a party that you like, that you're supporting, then call them and say, hey, can I volunteer, with your campaign today? Can I go to a poll? Can I be a voting poll worker, right? Polls open at 6 a.m. That's right. 6 a.m. to 7. So you can go. Matter of fact, before the kids get up, you can go vote early, come back, they're up, and start your day. You can get in line early. You can do it. It's an opportunity. It's your opportunity, again, to make your voice heard. But it has to be intentional. It's got to be intentional. So you can go, like I said, make it intentional. So many people have died. So many people have bled. So many people have sacrificed their lives for you to go and vote. Yeah, and you're exactly right, Marvin. When we talk about people that have died, and the indignities that they suffered, it's guessing the number of jelly beans in a jelly jar. Grandfather clause. If your grandfather can vote, you can vote. Literacy tests. Poll taxes. Being able to, you had to pay a tax in order to go vote. How many people would actually do that, right? How many people would do that if they had to do it today? But that was taken off our books. That was something that we don't have to do anymore. But it just didn't happen. The policies worked, right? But that just didn't happen because someone said, hey, this is a bad thing. But it happened because we had someone here in our area, Evelyn T. Butts. She was one who fought. She was one that said, listen, this is something that we should not be doing. So challenging the poll tax, challenging the unfair election process, coming from humble beginnings, her challenge to Virginia poll tax reached the U.S. Supreme Court. That case, combined with others in Fairfax County, in Harper versus Virginia, State Board of Elections in 1966, it challenged that, and it helped establish concerned citizens of Norfolk, which resulted in the election of African Americans to public office. That was intentional. And we have a historical marker downtown, in this area, at the MLK Monument, signifying that. You can go to WVEC.com, where I was fortunate enough to do a story on the news signifying that. Phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. But it's election time. And because of people like Sister Evelyn Butts, people like Dr. Martin Luther King, and many, many, many others, we've got this opportunity to go out and make our voice heard. But listen, we're going to take a quick break. This is Stay the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville. This is our Get Out the Vote show. We want you to get out there. We want you to go vote. We want you to make your voice heard. But we're going to come back in just a moment, and we're going to talk about why this election is so close and look at who's on the ballot, what are the messages out there, and where we can expect this race to end up. We'll be back in just a moment.
Program support sponsored in part by ALW Entertainment. It's a joyful holiday experience. Sunday, January 2nd at the Hampton Coliseum. Featuring Marvin Sapp.
Never would have made it.
The Clark Sisters. Charles Jenkins. And Leandra Johnson and Ricky Dillard and New G. For tickets, Ticketmaster.com. It's a joyful holiday experience. Sunday, January 2nd at 4 p.m. at the Hampton Coliseum.
Programming on Hot 91 is supported by G5 Events and Ride With Me Entertainment, presenting the Michael Blackson Comedy Show.
Talk about Stevie Wonder sees me every day. What do you mean by that?
Michael Blackson on stage, live.
You look like a foreigner. They want to see your license. Listen, where's your green card? I'm from Philly, man. You know what I mean? I'm Michael Blackson. Please, I'm out.
The Michael Blackson Comedy Show, Sunday, October 31st, 8 p.m. at Norfolk's Chrysler Hall. For more information, Ticketmaster.com. Michael Blackson on stage, live.
It's Stay in the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville. Welcome back to this beautiful Sunday here in Hampton Roads. We're broadcasting on the campus of the Norfolk State University on WNSB FM. It's the new sound of Hot 91, the soul of VA. This is our Get Out to Vote show here in the Commonwealth of Virginia on Tuesday, November 2nd after the polls close at about 8, 9 o'clock. We will know who will be our next governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general for the next 4 years here in the Commonwealth. And also, all will know who will be our next 100 House of Delegate members representing us in the state legislature, ensuring the future of the Commonwealth. Where are we going? What are the platforms? What are the things that we believe that our elected officials should be doing for us? We're going to talk about that on this half of the show. In the first half of the show, we talked about you being able to get out to vote. Early voting has ended. We had record numbers of people that early voted. I early voted, my family. Our producer here in the studio, Marvin Folks, also known as DJ Scandalous, his parents early voted. He's going to be in the trenches on November 2nd. Also at the polls, the voting polls. And there are many, many people who are out there volunteering, and we want you to go out. If you haven't voted, make sure you vote on Tuesday. The polls are extended open, 6 a.m., 7 p.m. Go vote where you normally vote. If you're unsure, you can go to your city website. You can go to here in the Commonwealth, in the city of Norfolk. You can go to norfolk.gov, and you can look up where I go vote. There are many opportunities on social media. I know that in the last presidential election, Facebook, which is now named Meta, but Facebook created a mechanism to where people can click and find out where they go vote. There are individuals and different groups that are sending out messages, people going door to door saying you can vote here, you can vote there. There's opportunities to go out because there's a state holiday for voting here in the Commonwealth. For those companies that are giving additional time, you can go go as a group, your lunch group. You guys can go vote to be COVID safe. If you're not comfortable, take separate cars, whatever the case may be. Take your mask, go in and vote. If you have a mail-in ballot and you haven't mailed it in, drop it in the mail, or you can take it, drop it in the box, or you can take it and drop it off at your voting location. There's opportunity there. This is an exciting time for you to make your voice heard. It's an opportunity for you to go out and say, hey, we want to make sure that the people in our area are voting and the people in our area are getting out, and that we're going to say this is where we believe our voices, our city, our state should go in setting the trend for the future. Now, speaking of setting the trend for the future, before I get to that, how important this race is in the Commonwealth and the reasons why it's so tight, I want to let you know here in the city of Norfolk who's on your ballot. So, in the city of Norfolk, depending on which area you live in, I want to tell you who's on your ballot, and keep in mind there are two sides to your ballot. Two. Flip it over. Page 1 of 2 and 2 of 2. Make sure you flip it over, and make sure that you vote on both sides, okay? I'm pretty sure they're going to tell you that at the voting polls as well. Make sure you get in there and vote, okay? So who's on the ballot in sample ballot here for the city of Norfolk? We know that we have the candidates for governor. At the top of the ticket, we have Republican Glenn Youngkin, Democrat Terry McCullough, and also third party, Libertarian Party, Princess Blanding. For lieutenant governor, we have Republican Winsome Sears and Democrat Hala Ayala. We also have Attorney General. We have Republican Jason Myers and also Democrat and incumbent Mark Herring. The only incumbent on this list, Mark Herring, for the top offices in our state. And that's interesting because within the top offices of the state, we know that our governor cannot run consecutive terms. So, in essence, Terry McAuliffe is about the closest thing that you'll have to an incumbent. But our new lieutenant governor, whoever she may be, it will be history in the making. Because for the first time, we'll elect a woman and also a woman of color as lieutenant governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia. So however this thing shakes out, we can look at that as being progress. Also, we have the Commonwealth's attorney, Raman Fadahi. He's the only candidate. And because there were no Republicans that ran in the June election to nominate for the general election, by default, he's going to end up being our new Commonwealth's attorney. We also have incumbent and long-serving sheriff Joe Barron running against Neil Bradley. And again, longtime serving sheriff. We also have Commissioner of Revenue Blight Scott, Adam Goldberg, and Nicole Sanders. And our treasurer, again, Don Hester, longtime public servant. I told Don, I said, I love seeing you in the parade in Norfolk State every year because she walks that parade route. She loves it. And she said that's the only way to do it. So she doesn't stop, and she doesn't stop serving for the people here in the Commonwealth, and also more specifically in the city of Norfolk. So definitely a phenomenal public servant. And in Super Ward 7, now we actually did a special show, Super Ward 7. We talked about, we had candidates who chose to call in and talk about their platform. We mentioned all of them here on this show. They're going to be running for the unexpired term to end December 31st, 2024, left unfilled because the former city councilwoman who represented Angela Graves is currently the new delegate who ran for that position that was left by the former delegate who actually was appointed to judge. And that was Delegate Lindsay. So a lot of progress, a lot of movement. Right now, the Honorable Danica Worcester was chosen to fill that spot currently. So she is currently serving as city councilwoman for Super Ward 7. But in this election, she's also running for the additional unexpired term along with Jason Inga, Philip Hawkins, Jackie Hope Glass, Frederick McRae, and Michael Muhammad. So you've seen their signs all around town. And these are the ones who are running here in the city of Norfolk. Now, depending on which House district you're in, if you're in the 79th district, we have Lawrence Mason and Nadarius Clark who are running to be your 79th House district representative. Also, if you live within the 89th House district, we have Delegate Jay Jones or Gerald Jones, and also Hans Copeland running. We know that Delegate Jay Jones is the incumbent here who's running for re-election in that district. And again, this depends on which district you actually live in, but the city of Norfolk, that is a constant. All right. So that's not going to change. In the 90th House district, you have Angela Williams Graves, we just talked about, who was serving on the city council in Super Ward 7, who is also running for re-election in that seat. And she's being challenged by Sylvia Bryant. So again, depending on which district you live in, these are the areas in which you will vote. And finally, in District 100, you have Robert Bloxon and Finale Norton, who's running in that particular district. All right. So again, the city doesn't change. It's constant. From governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, Commonwealth's attorney, Super Ward 7 council member. And we're looking at Super Ward 7 more specifically. And then also the sheriff and treasurer and the commissioner of revenue. The only thing that changes on your ballot is going to be your House district, whether it's 79th district, whether it's 89th district, whether it's the 90th district or the 100th district, okay? So that's going to be the only difference in your ballot, all right? So let's take a look at this race now, all right? let's get to the meat of it. So about 6 weeks ago, we talked about it. We looked at the top of the ticket. Former Governor Terry McAuliffe had between a 9 and a 10-point lead in this gubernatorial race, between a 9 and a 10-point lead. But after one debate and a snippet was taken out and creating a messaging by the Youngkin campaign, this race has now shrunk from a 9 to 10-point lead to a 1% lead. 1% lead by Terry McAuliffe. 1%. Last week, we talked about 4 top reasons that we believe, and we utilized a publication from Roanoke. We believe this race had gotten close, Now we're taking a look at the Washington Post. This publication was just 2 days, 2 days ago, October 29th, about Virginia governor's race, a toss-up as Election Day nears, from post-Shar school poll finds. So let's take a look at what they're saying here on this Washington Post publication, where they looked at it being a toss-up with 49% of likely voters favoring Terry McAuliffe and 48% favoring the Republican Glenn Youngkin. This is from the Washington Post Shar school poll. Now, when they looked at this, they said there was a little change from last month, right, where it measured 50% at McAuliffe, 47% with Youngkin, although the Democrat 6% percentage point edge among all registered voters in September narrowed to 3 points at 47 to 44. Now, they're also showing what the third-party candidate, the Libertarian, Blanding, is polling at 1% among likely voters. So McAuliffe is polling at 49% among likely voters. Youngkin, 48% among likely voters. Blanding, 1% among likely voters. Among registered voters, there's a much greater margin that favor McAuliffe. 47% favors Terry McAuliffe, 44% favors Youngkin, and 3% favors Blanding. Now, there's an other in this category, or none these, or would not vote, no opinion. Those are not shown. But according to the legend here, this is a poll of over 1,000 voters, 1,107 to be exact. And registered voters were 918 likely voters in the gubernatorial election. Margin of error plus minus 3.5% of registered for registered voters, and a plus minus 4% for likely voters. So that just tells us this is razor thin. It's a toss-up. All right? This is a major, major toss-up now. So all those numbers are with what we call the margin of error, within the margin of error. So Marvin's asking, what's the difference between Republican, Democrat, and Libertarian? For the most part, the Democratic candidate, those are the candidates that represent more of what they call the progressive agenda. The Republican candidate represents more of a conservative agenda, and the Libertarian represents more of a free government agenda. So basically, less government interference on all levels. Also, there are other areas that they favor when we take a look at environment and the like, but it kind of changes state to state, right? But for the most part, those are the national platforms. Now, of every party, you have extremists, right? So with the Republican Party, we saw the extremists on January 6th. We saw what we call the Trumpisms, the Trump voters. That's the extreme of the party. Now, some would argue that is the party, because we got a lot of Republicans on the national level that's not running for re-election. And if they're not supporting Trump or supporting his ideas, then they're getting just blasted in their elections for the nomination to run in general elections. I mean, so that argument's out there. The numbers do show it and the like. Now, Your Democratic voters, again, that agenda represents more progressive policies, more inclusive policies as relates to different groups and the like. So you have a lot more groups that are within that party. The most faithful voting bloc of that party are African-American voters. Ever since Lyndon Baines Johnson and the signing of some of the most historical legislation in the 1960s, more specifically the Civil Rights Act, Voting Rights Act, Higher Education Act, and Fair Housing Act, and so forth. Right. So they all passed, and that's when the shift came from Republican to Democrat fully, for the most part. But good questions, very good question, because now it kind of gives us an idea of who wins, what direction Virginia's going. Okay, the policies. Now we're going to talk about where these policies really hit the ground, and where they get fleshed out, and that's the power of the legislature. I'm just going to throw that out there. That's the power of the legislature. So let's take a look from this poll. Now, we took a look at the numbers, right? Now, why is Youngkin, who was polling at 9 to 10 points, legitimately 9 to 10 points behind Terry McCullough, where did he increase? Well, Youngkin is fueled primarily by an 18-point advantage among independent likely voters. That's up from 8-point advantage last month. A significant swing in this group could determine this year's election. All right. Now, this article also points out that while Virginia does not register voters by party, 33% of voters in the poll identified themselves as independent. That comes with 34% who said they consider themselves Democrat, 27% who are Republican. So more than likely, when people say they're independent and not a third party, they're more likely to vote Democrat more so. But it also shows a poll conducted October 20th through the 26th finds a larger share of voters saying education is the top issue in their vote compared to a September poll, with fewer citing coronavirus as the biggest factor. Now, I want to point this out. Because the economy has opened back up, because of the great job that the current administration and the national administration has done in order to fuel the vaccination of communities, what the past legislature have done with the CARES Act, infusing monies to help people get the resources they need, unemployment, paid care. I mean, just phenomenal. Listen, the CARES Act was so successful. In my opinion, I think that should have been the social policy blueprint moving forward, because it really created opportunity for people. I mean, there's no more talk about living wage now. It's there. And what happened was the CARES Act and workers, employees forced that narrative. Yeah, prices have gone up slightly, but it has not triggered inflation, and people are now living, not struggling. That's a difference. People don't have to work 3 jobs. And they may work 2, because you got Christmas, you got kids coming up, braces. Look, trust me, we know, these things happen. You buy braces for your kids, tuition, or braces, what I call that used car payment, that you're making on the future of health of your teeth. But those are all good things. So we understand you may have to get a second job. But people are not having to work 3 and 4 jobs to live, to make ends meet. Now they can work 1, sometimes just 2, and really have a balance of life. So, when we talk about social policy, when we talk about creating opportunities, this all happened under coronavirus packages and coming out of it. So we're out. We're open. University's open. We're in. So the worry about that is really not a main issue, but it's education now. Now, let's get to education and see what's what. All right? And then, here's another important point. The Libertarian candidate, Princess Bland, more likely is pulling from Democrat Terry McCullough. There's 1% among likely voters, and then 3% among registered voters. but it's significant in a close race. And I want to point something out too. If you go back to 2013, when Terry McAuliffe ran for governor and won, there were 3 candidates in the race. He didn't get 50% of the votes. He ran against Ken Cuccinelli. He didn't get 50% because there was a third-party candidate that polled at 6.5%. I think Ken Cuccinelli polled at a little bit over 45%, but Terry McAuliffe polled at about 47.8 or 48.7%. So that Libertarian candidate pulled a lot away to where there was not the ability to get over 50%. So in essence, Terry McAuliffe is outperforming or really performing right at where he performed in the 2013 election. So it's really the ability to get these independent voters out and to turn the vote for you at a level that doesn't hurt you. But more specifically, this election is about getting your base to the polls, getting your base to the polls out to vote. Who's registered to vote? You see that margin is higher, 3%. Still in the margin error, but 3% favors the Democratic incumbent. Again, we're talking the more than likely to be incumbent. You know, he's running like an incumbent, former governor. And it's really about getting there. Now, why did education become the major issue? It's because there was the messaging. And it's really, if you listen to the ads, these are wedge issues. It's mismessaging. They talk about CRT, critical race theory, not wanting our kids to learn about the indignities and the horrors of slavery that were perpetuated by white Americans who were in power at that time through policy and law to do the things that they did. We heard some prominent African-American conservatives on television on one show say that we're making white, kids and feel guilty. Again, it's history. It's what happened. It's never been taught like this. In other words, we're just telling the truth. It's not saying that someone is inherently racist. Critical race theory simply says that the policies that were created favors one group and didn't favor others. And then this is what transpired out of that. It's history. It's our story. It's who we are as Americans because it's what happened to us as Americans. But guess what? Critical race theory is not taught K through 12. So you're creating a false reality, which is a lie. It's also mismessaging, creating fear. Now, of course, there's one commercial about someone that talked about a book, a parent that's being publicized about Beloved and so forth. And really it's about the horrors that the late Toni Morrison, you read the book, the horrors of slavery, where, she claimed that her child was having nightmares. Now, again, slavery was terrible. It was terrible for everybody. Every African-American family that went through it was terrible. And it was terrible for our country, right? Yeah. A lot of people have nightmares about it, but what about the victims that are still being victimized from those policies? It's a living nightmare many, many times over. Yeah. Relative generation that we really haven't dealt with. We haven't dealt with that. So when we ask ourselves, why are communities doing what they're doing? Why do we see a lot of things happening in our communities that are not happening in others? It's because we never dealt with the trauma for what has happened to us. Not just a quarter of a millennial, 250 years, 247 to be exact, of slavery, but also the 100 years of Jim Crow and segregation, legalized lynchings, and the like. We haven't dealt with it. That's trauma. That's 347 years of pure trauma. And you're saying get over it in 50 years? Nah. So, right. So swept under the rug. So that's where we are. So now education rivals the economy as being the biggest top issue in Virginia. As a matter of fact, in September, according to the Washington Post Sharp poll, in September, education was 15% of the main issue. October is 24%. The economy was 27%. Now it's 23%. But But of course, the economy and education, as we talked about, E to the third power. Two of them, always the two top issues we can deal with because it affects every single person, right? So, with that being the case, where are we at? You can ask yourself, where do we want to go? How do we get there? The only way we can get there is we go vote and make our voice heard. Lastly, the question becomes, does the national issues have an effect on what's happening here in Virginia? According to this article, it says Biden's popularity in Virginia has sagged since 2020 when he won the state by 10 points. And his struggles to get Congress to go along with massive spending on infrastructure and other priorities is doing McCulloch no favors. Virginia voters, likely voters, disapprove of Biden's job performance by 53% to a 40% margin, and more than twice as many voters strongly disapprove as strongly approve. So you're looking at 44% to 21%. However, Virginia governors are prohibited from running for re-election, we know, but Governor Northam is outperforming Biden with 51% of likely voters approving of his performance as opposed to 44% disapproving. Now, why is this significant? It's significant because all politics is local. So the reason why I don't believe that the national issues are having a major effect upon Virginia voters is because of what's happening on the state level. It's what's happening coming out of the governor's office, what's happening coming out of the state legislature, what's happening coming out of the Senate. We have progressive policies with a humane focus, and I'm quoting Delegate Cliff Hayes, that are making a difference here in the Commonwealth. So when we take a look at what's dragging down McCulloch, that's not it. But on the other hand, when we take a look at what's the drag on Youngkin, 9% of likely voters saying the former president's endorsement makes them more likely to support the Republican, while 37% says it makes them less likely to support him. And that's a 53% majority say it makes no difference to them. So Trump still he's hovering over the Republican Party here in the Commonwealth and really across the country. But what are these issues? What are these issues that are going to make a difference? You can go to the Washington Post Sharp poll and take a look at different groups of African-American voters. 86% favor McCulloch, 7% favoring Youngkin, urban voters, suburban voters, almost even. There's an advantage there to McCulloch at 52%. But these are making a difference. These are the real issues. These are the real numbers. And we're going to find out what happens. But our time is running short, but you can listen to more about election analysis on election night. I'll be appearing on WTKR on election night, giving real results. And also I'll do pre-election analysis on Wavy here in the market. But you can listen more as we break down this election. Listen more as we talk about the issues. Listen more as we talk about where our state is headed. It's in your hands now. You got the information. You've got where to vote. Go and make your voice heard. Get out and vote. Polls open at 6 a.m. and close at 7. Go and vote. Make it intentional. Take family, friends. Get out. Make your voice heard. And tune in on election night at WTKR, where I will be breaking down the election analysis. This is State of Water. I'm your host, Dr. Claville. We'll see you next time.